We demystify what goes on behind the therapy room door. Join us on this voyage of discovery and co-creative conversations. This is the Therapy Show, Behind Closed Doors podcast, with Bob Cooke and Jacci Jones.
Welcome back to the next episode of the Therapy Show Behind Closed Doors with myself, Jacci Jones, and the wonderful Bob Cooke.
Well, thank you, and Happy New Year. And Happy New Year to all the listeners as well.
Absolutely, however you celebrate it. So the title of this one is New Beginnings for Clients and Therapists Within the Therapy Process.
Yeah, as we enter the beginning of 2025, well, actually it's the same every year for me in terms of what I'm going to say here. What I always did in the first therapy week of New Year with clients was reviews.
Yes.
In other words, what we've achieved in the last year.
Yeah.
And if we haven't, what's been the stumbling blocks to those changes? And looking at, where we want to go in the new year, what we want to work on, what we need to do to achieve that, and getting a plan, if you like, for therapy in the new year in 2025.
Yeah. It's a good time to review and regroup and see where we are. I think one of the things for me, there's so much pressure on, New Year's resolutions and setting a New Year's resolution and all that sort of stuff. But for me, there's something about letting go of the past is as important, if not more, than setting a New Year's resolution. Looking at, okay, if I'm going to do something new, then have I got to let go of old beliefs or old patterns and focusing on that just as much.
Yeah, and also I'd add learning from the past.
Yes. Yeah.
I think clients and therapists need to learn from the past. Exactly what you just said there. Eric Berne, when he was talking about script and script plans and a script, well, first of all, Eric Berne was and is the originator of transaction analysis, though he died in 1970 of a double heart attack. In his first book, he talked about script and as an unconscious life plan with a beginning, middle, and end, which is enacted out throughout life. I wanted to put that definition down. Now, if you've got a hopeless script or a helpless script or a harmatic script, then the therapist will work with the client, if it's challenging for them, and it will be with all those types of scripts, on how to change those scripts and put a new script on the road. So New Year is a wonderful time to look at how far the client has got with their changes and to celebrate them if they've made those changes and to look at what changes they want to make to contract with them, recontract, if you like, and look at what they need to do to utilize those changes.
Yeah.
New Year is a perfect time for that. It's like a new beginning, if you want to put it symbolically.
Yeah. Because, I found myself when I was going through therapy, making a change was hard. It was difficult. Maintaining that was even harder. At certain times, even now, I'll slip back into my scripty stuff. So it's the maintaining. Sometimes it's like you got to keep your hand on the steering wheel, because when you let go, it's so easy to fall back into old patterns.
No, you're right. I have read, I think, every TA book. The latest ones that have come out, perhaps not so much, but I certainly read all Burns and a lot of the early TA therapists, and a lot of them who wrote about the importance of contracts and looking how we go forward ahead, but not enough written, in my view, on how we maintain those positive changes from the contractual process. And I think therapists, TA therapists particularly, because contractual theories have centre of their theory, needs to regularly check up on how the person's going with maintaining the positive changes from the contractual process if they have got there.
Yeah.
And that
Because
was never.
it's the same, you know, we make New Year's resolutions every year, and usually by the end of January, we've not done it, or we've not stuck to it, or we've forgotten about it, or whatever. So it's kind of like human behavior that we do fall back into old patterns quite easily.
Well, it's interesting because you've put the two together, haven't you? Because I was talking about reviews and contracts and recontracting and looking at where we've achieved and where we're going and new beginnings. And I think it's so easy to put that with New Year's resolutions. And I can see where you've gone with it in terms of, you know, people keep New Year's resolutions, make New Year's resolutions and often don't keep them. So I think it's quite a good symbolism in terms of a therapist looking at, you know, how come they haven't maintained the changes from last year, or what needs to happen for them to actually maintain the changes that come out of the therapy process is a good thing to look at.
Yeah.
I mean,
especially at this time of year. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's new beginnings. So that's when it should be done. Review old patterns and look at new patterns. Now, so that leads on to the second very, very vital thing that therapists should be doing anyway, per se, regardless of being new year. And that is looking at what are the sabotage mechanisms that clients employ that means they don't maintain these new decisions.
Yeah.
Because you're correct. Because if people did, they wouldn't be in therapy in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You and I know that.
Yeah. And it's not easy. And, you know, one of your favorite sayings that I quote to all my clients, and I'm sure they're fed up of hearing it, is that therapy is a process, not an event.
Absolutely.
And
Have to work at it.
we've got it sussed and we know what we're doing, and then life throws us a curveball and sometimes we fall back and we've got to get back on the wagon again. And it's an ongoing process.
Yeah. So we need to look at or reflect with the client on what is their sabotage mechanisms. You know, what might they do to stop or not maintain their progress?
Yeah.
What we put in place so the reverse happens.
Yeah. And for me, you know, there is a big thing about letting something go. You know, if you're, I don't know, 50 years old and you've got your life script and you've lived by that life script for 50 years, to suddenly let that go and replace it with something else, it's not an easy thing to do.
No, and the truth is, Jackie, I mean, no one does that.
No.
No
But
one
that's
just
what they
wakes up.
expect to do when you're talking about a new
Yeah.
script and making
Well, they
changes.
expect them. I think the expectations by therapists maybe, and I'll do them injustice, perhaps, or certainly by clients, is that they can make a decision and suddenly they're going to keep it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a myth.
Yeah.
And because, as I said, if they were able to, if people were able to do that, then everybody would leave a healthy life and didn't even no need for therapists. But that doesn't happen. People spend a lot of energy actually maintaining their unhealthy patterns.
Yes.
Reason? Because as you just said, the old unhealthy patterns provide a sense of identity,
Yeah.
a sense of predictability,
Yes.
a sense of continuity,
Yes.
a sense of stability. So to let that all go, it doesn't happen overnight.
No.
It's an experiment.
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it. And I think that's what I've said to clients is, do you know what I mean? Give it a go and see. It was your darling wife that said something when I was in group therapy with her. And I use that analogy, is it's like getting on a train. And we know the stops, we know the people that get on, we know the route, we know how long it takes, we know everything about it. And when we go to therapy, we're asking somebody to get on a new train where they don't know where it's going, they don't know where it stops, they don't know how long it's going to take. And it's really difficult, but it's okay for them to get off and go back on the other train sometimes. It's not, we don't have to stay on the one. We can choose.
Mm. I think that most people will lapse, and then, in your metaphor, a very good one, take one step back, maybe,
Yeah,
to enable them to take 2 steps forward.
absolutely. Yeah. And that's okay.
Well, it's more than okay. I think yes, it's okay. And it's
Yeah.
important for the therapist to support them in that process.
I think for me, when I go back in my script, I do an awful lot of reflection and come out of it a changed person again for whatever reason. You know, I know that I lay traps for people. I know an awful lot about myself now, but I get curious about why did I do that in that situation?
Yeah, because same as everybody, me, you, and everybody else, we make these early decisions in response to the environment around us. Now, if the environment around us is dysfunctional for whatever reasons, we will make survival decisions to cope with that dysfunctional situation. Now,
And the best decision that we could at the time.
yeah, and as time goes on and we move into different situations, human beings tend psychologically to keep that same script going. And actually, they don't need to keep it going.
Yeah.
They do, because it provides sense of identity, familiarity, stability, predictability, and sense of continuity. So psychologically, that's what happens. The process of changing that is what psychotherapists have struggled with forevermore. How do they help their clients go through that transformational change?
Yeah.
So whether it's transaction analysis, Gestalt, client-centered therapy, or any of these therapies, really, that is the central dilemma.
Maybe you should do a book on that if there isn't that many.
I'm sure there's loads of books
literature
written on
out
that
there.
transformational process. Maybe I should just take it from my 40 years of work. Have I got the answer to that? No, but I have got some clues and I have got some thoughts. I think the most important thing, actually, is the relationship. Though, interestingly enough, I was reading a latest book, or was it a podcast by Mick Cooper, who's a sort of counselor, therapist,
Yeah.
teaches it, has lots of books, and he's into research, and he was talking about change, and he was talking about, in fact, higher than relationship in terms of motivation is change is motivation. And the people, if they're very highly motivated to change, then they will.
Yeah.
What he doesn't talk about, well, I haven't read the book, so perhaps I don't give him a disservice in this, but how does the client get the motivation in the first place? Perhaps he does, but I haven't read the book. But interestingly enough, I think motivation comes out of may come out of a secure, stable relationship. So we go back to relationship again for me.
Yeah. See, the motivation, I think, is a fascinating thing because it's self-motivation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, or which to me is the difficult part. Again, it's like having a New Year's resolution and sticking to it. Often we get motivation externally from other people, and that can go at any point. Do you know what I mean? If it's in a
Oh, I am very much
relationship,
with you.
I'm a big person about accountability. I do need accountability. I'm not very good at self-motivating.
What
So
do you mean by accountability?
if I say to somebody I'm going to do something, I'm more likely to do it than if I just think I'm going to do it, if that makes sense.
Oh, what you mean is then held to account, do you?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't let somebody else down. If I said I was going to do something, then I wouldn't let them down, but I'm okay at letting myself down, do it quite regular.
Well,
So
that's two
it's
sides to accountability, yeah.
maybe there's something about working on the self-motivation and prioritizing ourselves and things like that.
Well, this all comes from a person's script.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a very central thing, let's say, I joined a gym last January now. And
Wow. Well done, you. That's one
keep,
thing you've kept up.
I keep a list of how many times I go. And I try to average 2 times a week. And I was looking at my list, and I've done pretty well keeping 2 times a week.
Well done.
Even though I had a cold, I went a bit silly, but I did go. But anyway, where I'm going with this. So sometimes I think, well, how do I manage that? Because sometimes I just don't want to go to the gym. And the next question is, what motivates me?
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, what does motivate me get out and go to the gym? You know, what forces me? Because it has to be some internal process. And actually, it's usually I say to myself some things like, well, it's going to be good for you. It's going to be better for my health. In other words, self-care.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, if you've had a history where there's been very little self-care, then you haven't got that narrative voice.
Yeah.
I think motivation becomes harder. That's why I said, I think motivation comes from relationship,
Yes.
a healthy relationship, so that you can take those words inside yourself and self-regulate.
Yeah.
This
That's
is
a
where
really good example. Yeah.
this is where a therapist comes. This is where a therapist's role comes crucial in the help of helping the client who isn't very good with self-regulation of emotions, say, or even behavior, to develop a healthy regulated
Internal
pattern.
narrative. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
usually comes through support recognition from the therapist.
Yeah.
It's taken internally and start to then self-regulate.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the things I think that most of us can work on is prioritizing ourselves. I think it's something that is seen as selfish.
You know, Jackie, you're completely right. And I think really it's one of the central tenets that clients come with, even if they don't say it that way. And for the client that's had very little of people who prioritize them,
Yeah.
that becomes a huge challenge.
Yeah.
So they haven't got those words of recognition, positive recognition, or being prioritized in their head or even their experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it goes back to what you were saying about the script. It's the familiar. Yes, it might be uncomfortable, but it's familiar. We know how it works. We know how it feels. And when we step out of that and do something different, like prioritizing ourselves, it's really uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable. And therapists at New Year, particularly symbolically, need to do reviews, look at how far the person has come, establishing a new script and maintaining it,
Yeah.
and have new contracts, if you like, have new beginnings about how we go forward. It's a
Yes.
perfect time to do it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And the other side of this is the therapist. So I think it's a good time for therapists, whatever development level they are, whether they're very experienced, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, whether they've only just started as therapists. I think it's very good practice to look at, well, what could I have done differently, maybe, that you
Yeah.
know that I didn't do last year that I could do next year. Might say, well, okay, I need some perhaps more CPD on working with neurodiversity, so I'll go and get some.
Yes. Yeah.
Or perhaps I could have. It's a good time for therapists to review their own practice as well,
Yeah.
I believe.
I do too. It makes us better therapists to look at any gaps that we've got and to celebrate the positives. If there's anything that we're doing that's working well, keep it going.
Well, yes, and I think therapists, well, I think many people do this. They forget that part you've just said, which is to look at what they've done well. In
Yeah.
supervision, I do a lot of supervision still. I always encourage supervisors to bring, just even if it's only once, something they did well with the clients so they could celebrate. And I think you're perfectly right. At New Year's, a really good time to do it again. Look back at their clinical load and celebrate and think what they did well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can learn and move forward.
Absolutely. Because again, it's self-care. It's being able to recognize the things that we're good at. We're really good at noticing and pointing out our bad points, but to be able to notice the good things that we do or about us, our personality
Yeah.
is a positive. Yeah.
Yeah. So New Year, I always recontracted, look at contracts and all things I've just talked about with clients. Always.
Yeah.
And I also looked at my own clinical practice and thought about, well, what do I want to go ahead with this and celebrate what I did well, etc., etc. That was always a ritual of mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Always.
I think it's a really good one to have. And it's not about being critical, it's about being objective and looking at, like you say, what's worked, what's not worked.
That's right. And I do think part of the contract at New Year needs to be what you said, which is how are we going to maintain and integrate these new changes?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a big part of the therapy that I do now
Mm, mm.
is, because a lot of them are clients that I've had for a while, it is about, okay, are we slipping back into old habits here? And, what's going on? And just getting curious about things and how do we maintain it? Because sometimes it is like you've got to have your hands on the steering wheel all the time. And it's exhausting for some people.
Yeah, it's not straightforward therapy.
Yeah.
I'll put it another way,
No,
change isn't straightforward.
it's change can
Change,
be scary. Yeah. We've got
change.
to
I mean,
let something go.
yeah. Now, very simple things. I walk around. I live near the Mersey. And I've started walking again. I haven't been walking that much for various reasons, my calf muscles and things like that. But I used to have lots of walks. I started walking again, and I do a circular route of nearly 3 miles most mornings if I can do it. And I haven't been able to do it because of my cold. And I go a certain way round. I'm doing my hand as I go along, which is nearly 3 miles. Yeah. Now, after a while, I get bored doing it the same way. So I think, right, okay, so I'll do it the other way.
Yeah.
So I reverse. And when I reverse and I do it the other way, I get a completely different perspective. It's a bit, I see things I never saw before, and it's quite exciting. But even so, I miss the familiarity of the other way round.
Yeah. I love, see, that's for me, that's a real insight, and it's getting curious and noticing these little things rather than just, going through life with blinkers on. I think it's really good to explore. Why is that? It's the same route, it's just backwards.
But you know what I also realize is that I take longer reversing it. So I can happily or contentedly or psychologically stay with the same way round until I force myself to say, oh, well, I'll try a different reverse prediction because I get so used to the familiarity.
Yeah.
But when I change, even though I have to keep at it and force myself to do it, I get a completely new perspective and see things I never saw before. And I think change is a bit like that. You need to force yourself to do it and then experiment with what perhaps is different with the change.
Yeah. I
And New
think
Year is a fantastic time.
Yeah, and I think that's the learning that comes from it, rather than just doing it and forgetting about it. It's about getting curious and looking at how did it feel and did I notice different things? What was that like? Because we get a different perspective on things.
Mm, mm. So we need encouragement, though.
Yes.
If you've never had any, if you've had a childhood of trauma and dysfunction, I think things are more challenging.
Yeah.
So we need the therapist to stay supportive, the therapist to stay inquiring, and the therapist to help the person at a New Year recontract, make scripts and everything else that goes with it.
Do you encourage clients to journal?
Always.
Yeah.
I think journaling is a very important thing. And to write down, this is the beginning of the new year, how you feel at the beginning of the new year, what you might want to do differently, and all the things that come out of the therapeutic process.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. In fact, even today, so I have an app. I've got my phone here.
Yeah.
I go to it, and I have an app which is called I've opened it now, and I don't know what it's called, but it's journal. I think it's a journal anyway. I think it's called One Day, but anyway, so every day I write up to 5 lines in my journal because it won't allow me to do any more than 5 lines
Or you do an
every
essay
day.
every
So
day.
today I said, my cold still going on, my 3rd day off work. I still feel very tired. However, I think I'm getting better slightly. And then the next one beneath that was snowing in the United Kingdom today, specifically in Didsbury. I hope it disappears soon, as I don't like the snow. And if I can go back the last 8 years,
Wow.
every day I wrote something in my journal. And they're often quite practical things, or I might reflect sometimes like if I'm cold, but that's the journal I do. However, a psychological journal is aimed at a different process, but I mean, it's in the same ballpark, but you would ask the person to talk about feelings
Yeah.
and reflect a bit about how things have changed. And if you're in therapy, I would say perhaps half a page a day, looking at experimenting with new scripts and changes and all these sorts of things. So I'm a huge journaling fan.
Yeah, and I
I
think
always did
bringing
it.
it in to reflect on and to discuss in therapy, because sometimes, you know, they come and they say, oh, well, nothing's happened. And it's like, well, I'm sure things have happened, you know, and just getting curious about
Yeah.
your thoughts and
Ask them in the
feelings.
new
And
year,
yeah,
bring that journal from last year in.
yeah, yes.
I think what you're talking about, way before I came in therapy, in the very dark times of my life, I'm talking way before therapy, I way before therapy, so I didn't even think of about this psychologically, by the way. But I bought these huge Collins diaries, and one page was, I don't know, one page was about 60 lines, so they were big pages. And I used to write down, and unfortunately, by part of my life, all the dark things. But I didn't think why I was doing it. It just felt psychologically very important to get it out of my system.
Yeah.
So I always did it anyway. And then eventually, as things got better, I had 17 or 15 or 11 of these diaries at very dark times of my life, and I burnt them.
You burnt them. That's
Burnt
quite
them.
a symbolic thing to do.
I was in therapy. I don't think I even told my therapist this, but I went away and burnt them because they were so dark to look at, and they reminded me of such a negative part of my life, which is now dissipated. Now is a much better part of my life. So that's another whole story for a podcast.
I think they're really good. I'm just going to get something, Bob.
Yeah, I think they're a really big part of. I really, or everybody listening to this, I think psychological journals are very important. Oh, here comes Jackie with her book.
I've got one that's available on Amazon, and it's called Sort Your Shizzle Out, More Than Just a Planner. And it's got space for journaling and a daily record and how are you feeling? How many hours sleep did you have? How am I feeling today? There's all sorts of stuff on there. There's also at the beginning, which I really love, it's got permission slips
Oh, fantastic.
and
Fantastic.
a wheel of life that you can fill out at the beginning and at the end. But I do like journaling, but I think for me, the big thing that I get from it is I notice patterns of behavior. At certain times, I'll repeat certain patterns, and it just stands out more when you journal and you read back.
I think it's extraordinarily psychologically healthy, and I think to take it into therapy would be very useful, and to share with your therapist,
Yeah.
and for the therapist to, be able to use it therapeutically.
I think
Yeah,
if
it would be a
anything,
wonderful time.
people use it as a diary, but then don't go back and look at it. I think that the biggest part of journaling is to go back and
Yeah,
reflect
yeah,
on it and see
yeah.
on how far you've come, successes, failures, whatever it is, because yeah, sometimes we just forget.
Agree. It's a wonderful therapeutic tool.
And at this time of year, maybe it's a habit that you can start to do. You know, it doesn't need to be an essay and pages and pages. It can just be like 5 lines of something.
Yeah, that's more of a practical diet. But in terms of what you're talking about here, I think it's a marvelous therapeutic tool.
Yeah.
And could be utilized in the whole process of the new year and new beginnings. So
Absolutely.
I think
So
it's
that's
great.
a tip.
I
Yeah.
think it's great, and well done to you, creating a therapeutic tool like that.
Well, I wanted one for me and I couldn't find one that had everything in it that I wanted in one place, that had a diary and a journal and this. I ended up with that many different notebooks. It got too complicated.
Well, maybe a podcast we could do would be therapeutic journaling is an essential prerequisite for therapy.
Ooh, that would be a good one. Remember that one, Bob.
Right.
Write it down.
I know I write all these, always coming up with these titles, but I do like therapeutic journaling. I see the transformational purpose in it.
I doodle as well. I doodle in it. Do you know what I mean? If I'm doing so, I'm not an artist by any shape of the imagination, but I do doodle. So what
we could buy you a New Year's present, or yeah, it would be a therapeutic journal. No, I just think it's wonderful, and you don't have to wait till New Year to start it. But I do think
it's quite
New Year
symbolic.
would be a good time to think about these things.
Yeah. So until next time, Bob, where we will be discussing, evidently, sexual tension in the therapy room and what we can do about it.
We're discussing, say it again, sexual tension.
Sexual tension in the therapy room and what you can do about it.
Well, that's such a common supervisory issue that people bring. So when I thought that title up, I must have thought about endless time supervisees have come with that. And it does come up in the therapy room, of course, with clients, but it's often therapists who bring that for supervision. That is an interesting question. So I look forward to talking about that. Blimey, that's great.
I look forward to hearing what you've got to say about that one, Bob.
And you, of course, because I don't believe in all your therapy, actually in therapy and as a therapist, that this subject hasn't come up.
No, probably not.
It would be odd if it hadn't.
Yeah, I'll have to rack my brains and have a think.
I was talking in supervision to a supervisor the other day about this, who brought exactly this. And we were talking about exotic love and love in the transferential realm and the different types of love and all these sorts of things. So I do look forward to talking about this.
I think that's the thing, is the different types of love and admiration for somebody else or looking up to somebody, and what does all that mean?
I can see you are already up for this podcast.
Absolutely. So maybe not sexual tension, maybe it's something about loving the therapy. I don't know, but anyway.
Well, look, happy New Year to everyone.
Yes.
And on to our 5th year of podcasts, Jacci Jones.
Shocking.
Oh, I think it's been wonderful. I remember when we started, and I think Sari Taylor, a good friend of yours, recommended you, and because she hadn't got time or whatever it was. And
it could have been so different. It could have been not me, Bob.
Well, that's true, but I don't think of it that way, because I've enjoyed myself over the last 4 years immensely, and I look forward to continue in this year 2024 and 5 and beyond. So
absolutely,
thank you for the last 4 years, Jacci.
And thank you, because I get something from every podcast. It's not just the listeners that get something. I glean so much information from you. I refer to you as my mentor.
Oh, that's very nice for you. And I really mean it. It's been a wonderful, enriching 4 years. And I also hear a lot from people who listen to our podcasts, good things which keep me motivated. And, you know, what makes me smile, and you often send me an email or a text and say, have you got any more titles, Bob? So after 4 years of titles, I've got to go into the new year thinking up more titles.
Well, you always come up with some wonderful ones, the proper humdingers. So until next time, Bob.
Yeah, take care again. Good year.
You too.
Bye
Happy
bye.
New
Bye
Year.
bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
You've been listening to The Therapy Show, Behind Closed Doors podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. We'll be back next week with another episode.